right. Well, let's do this right off the bat today. Our first guest of spring training.
Wow.
There's only one person we wanted to talk to. For the big gun himself.
That's right.
Logan Gilbert. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Good talking to you guys.
It's good having you. This is now what, year 3 that we've done this with you.
Yeah.
I don't know that we did it before you were a major
Is this your
leaguer.
third big league camp?
I was here in 2020 when it got shut down.
Okay.
That was my first one.
That was fun.
Huh. Yeah. Didn't get a real taste of it.
Yes.
How different does it feel now?
It's night and day, honestly. I just feel really comfortable at this point, and also built so many relationships in the clubhouse. It's not feeling like I'm the new guy trying to prove myself necessarily.
But you don't feel like the old guy.
No, hopefully not.
Who's the old guy?
I don't even know. We were talking about it the other day. I think Haniger maybe. He's sneaky, like year 8, I think.
Is that because he shaved the head?
That's a good look.
I mean, it looks good, but he looks a little older.
Maybe at that point, year 8, I might be shaving my head. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's working.
That lettuce is still flowing. I don't know if I see that. What'd you work on this offseason? You're a tinkerer. What did you tinker with?
Yeah, notoriously. I was messing around a little bit with a cutter and 2-seam. I moved on the rubber a little bit, and I'm not sure if that's going to stick yet, but I was playing around with that.
Why?
So I performed better against lefties than righties, actually, which kind of reverse splits. And then my OPS or damage against fastball was a lot worse than previous years. However, my off speed was a lot better. So if you remember from 21, completely flipped. So now I'm trying to pair up the good off speed with the fastball that I had in 21, or kind of supplement that with a cutter and 2-seam, which can get guys off of the 4-seam. And then also that can help perform better against righties. I think if I move to the third base side, there might be a little deception or a better horizontal angle coming in. Not really behind a righty, but kind of from that angle. And then a 2-seam can get in, a cutter might get off the barrel. So just ideas.
It's funny. I had that in my notes for the interview, was that the reverse splits from last year, which seems so odd given the length of your arms and the angle you're coming at righties. Did you spend some time trying to figure out what that was about? Yeah,
I was digging in a little bit. Right in the off season, I went in some of the numbers on the splits, righties, lefties, how each pitch performs, stuff like that, and that stuff stood out really quickly. So that's kind of the easy thing to find out, but then it's more like why and how are you going to fix it, and that's a little bit tougher because my fastball was down 200 spin. I lost a little bit of the carry on it, and then I went into the edge video, the super slow-mo of my fingers, how it's coming off the ball. There were little differences from a couple years ago, but it's really hard to recreate. So then I was kind of at a standstill, and then I talked to the coaches, and then that's kind of how we landed on where we're at right now.
How do you fight paralysis by overanalysis?
Yeah.
And he asked you that because that's his problem.
No,
right?
That's my life story.
Right. Yeah. That's Rob's story. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. That is a bit of
from being a radio host to a parent.
A quarterback. But specifically as a quarterback.
No, as you were talking about that, I was thinking to one of my last NFL camps, and God bless Jim Zorn. You wouldn't remember him. He was the first Seahawk quarterback in '76. He's my QB coach. And he found this frame, and he was like, look at you before you throw. Your fingers come off, and I had never even known this, for 20 years of my life. He's like, look at your fingers are off the ball. We're going to get your fingers stuck on the ball because that's costing you. And then it was just what am I doing? And he's absolutely right. Fighting that paralysis by all of this data and information. How do you fight that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been a problem for me at times, more so years ago. I'm not saying I'm perfect now, but I kind of learned how to deal with it. And, I work with the mental skills coach, Byrne. He's helped me and a ton of other guys. Everybody seems to mention him. He's really helpful. And I've kind of just gotten to a point where I do my drills. I can think about what I want to think about if I'm trying to accomplish something movement-wise.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, when I get on the mound, I just shut my brain off, even to the point that I don't like calling my game or even shaking really at all. It's just whatever the catcher puts down. They know me better than me probably out there. So I just completely shut my brain off and go. I'm not thinking about anything. If anything, I can feel what I'm doing in real time if I need to make an adjustment, but I'm not thinking about where's my arm, where's my leg.
So you're not looking at any data between innings. You're not looking at your spin rate. You're not looking at videos. You're not doing any of that.
Barely ever. I really try not to.
Yeah.
If I feel like I'm at a point for whatever reason that day that I need to look at something, it feels off and I haven't made an adjustment, I'll go to the iPad for maybe one pitch and just look at my direction's the only thing. And in game, that's the only thing I'll allow myself to actually care about is my direction if I'm getting offline, where my momentum is going, and that can get my arm off, everything else off. But, yeah, I really try to stay away from it.
What do you think about during the game? I mean,
you're the mechanism.
You're the second pitcher. Yeah, you're the second pitcher to mention the mental skills. We talked to Brian Wu last week, and he mentioned that group. And he's another one where his numbers in college are really unimpressive, and he's got better numbers in the majors than he did in the minors.
Yeah.
But he really credited the mental skills folks for helping him with that. What do you think about, and how did they help you with that journey?
It's funny. I was talking to him about that yesterday, too, and I was like, how did you become this? Because he's so good right now.
He had 8.5 ERA.
We were talking about that yesterday.
College.
The morning meeting was got interviewed, and in front of everybody we were talking about his 8 ERA in college, and now he's like dominating big league teams. And how does this happen? For me, the only thing I really allow myself to think about is moving fast on the mound. So it's not as much a position that I'm trying to get into. It's just moving quickly, because that in a way shuts off my brain where I can't think about anything else. And between pitches, I'll somewhat be conscious of my breathing. That's kind of what I work with Burn on, of slowing it down, exhaling. And if you get into like a good breathing pattern, it kind of clears your mind, your body. You're not as tense, you're not as stiff, all that kind of stuff. So that in a way leads to better performance.
What was this offseason like for you?
It was great. I went to Italy at first, so that was kind of
nice.
Get my mind off everything. We went to kind of all over. We went to Rome, Tuscany, Florence, Venice, and Lake Como.
How many days?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
See, I got a 25th anniversary, and I'm trying to figure this out. The wife really wants to go to Italy.
That's what you need to do.
You need to? Okay.
Lake Como is my favorite spot in the world.
Do you know some people now?
Like you want to stay at their house?
No. We'll talk off the air about that.
I got a couple local friends over there.
Okay. 2 weeks, and it was just a blast.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, highly recommend it.
Totally clear. It's because it's fun. Like Bryce said, took a couple of weeks off of my arm, and that got back to throwing the back up, and everyone is a little bit different. So season ended, and you just try to totally get away from it all.
I try to, because I know that's when it's time to go. I don't ever shut it off, so I kind of have to force myself. And it's funny, when we were talking about all the numbers that I dove into, that was basically right after the season, when I'm kind of not supposed to. So it was just bugging me, because I wanted to figure all this stuff out. And then once I kind of got to the bottom of it, I didn't have the solution necessarily, but I was at the point where I'm like, okay, I'm now shutting it off 4 or 5 weeks, whatever. Don't even think about baseball. Barely watch the playoffs. It's hard to stay away from it. I watched a little bit, but take my time off, and then once I start throwing again, I get back into it mentally.
How frustrating was it to watch teams that you were right there with winning playoff games?
Yeah, it's hard, especially in our division when that could have been us coming out of there. I feel like everybody thought that when you're a game or two away at the very end, and any of those teams could have not been in or in the playoffs, and that could have been us. But it was right in front of us. It's on us. It's not like, you don't make excuses. We definitely could have been in if we played better at the very end. But I think it just shows that in our division, if you win the division, you can win the whole thing. That's the main point, and I think we have that team. We feel like we can win it right now, especially with the combination of hitting and pitching. I think it's the best it's been.
When I ask about off-season, not just some of the fun, also just some of the names that start swirling around and moves that are going to be made. And we've read about Scott going and visiting, I think even talking to you over the course of the off-season as well. So from a baseball perspective, you've been in this now long enough, you know how the whole game is played. When you see your name attached to trade rumors or teammates' names, Brian Wu's name attached to all of that, how do you process that during the off-season?
Yeah, it's tough. You try to keep your head down a little bit, but it's harder because in the offseason you're not playing baseball or anything. It's kind of like it's right in front of you if it pops up or whatever. For me, I think if any rumors like that popped up, it was really weird at first when you first start seeing your name. And that was kind of in the middle of the year last year. I was kind of like, what? No, like I'm a Mariner. It's not going to change ever. And I hope
drafted me. I've been here forever. I've developed here.
And I hope it doesn't change. But I think it's part of the business. It gets to a point when probably 90% of it doesn't have any validity anyways, but you start seeing your name enough that it's like, whatever happens, I believe God has a plan. I'll be wherever I'm supposed to be. But then seeing the other guys, it's weird. It hurts just as much when it's like, no, Wu can't go. Like, Bryce can't go. These guys are supposed to be here, and we finally have this amazing top-to-bottom rotation. and it's like I really hope this doesn't get messed up. And fortunately, they were really creative, I think, with the moves, and found a way to keep the rotation together when I thought it wouldn't be.
Yeah, I think we all are impressed with what they did, given some of the parameters around them. I'm talking to Logan Gilbert, and I know Scott did come visit you, and we've heard a little bit and read a little bit about what Scott did this offseason to really be transparent with the guys and explain the situation. How important, how meaningful was that for you?
It says a lot, the transparency, the honesty, when I think he doesn't necessarily need to loop us in like that. It's kind of like front office stuff and moves, and it's part of the business. But just getting to a position where he's willing to get everybody on the same page when I don't think anything was really not on the same page last year, but I think the media might have ran with it a little bit. So it just kind of shows that, all right, from day one, from the get-go, we're going to get on the same page here. We're going to get the best roster we've had. I feel like everything's moving in the same direction at the same time. And especially in the offseason when, like I said, he didn't have to do that, I think that means a lot.
So off-season, does he have more or less of a dad vibe? Like when he comes to the door? What? He's embraced this dad vibe. I read about it.
Yeah.
I read it in the paper.
He's, I mean, in a good way, I guess. Yeah, there's a little bit. It's a little more like, not as business, not as structured in the off-season, which is good. You kind of let your guard down. We're just hanging out. He got to see where I train. We went out to lunch, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's fun to see that side of it.
Do you have any new things added to the bag? Do you have any new toys?
I told you he was going to ask. Didn't I tell you he would
I
ask
should have
that?
brought my bag. I should
Yeah,
have
you
known.
should've.
Brock really wants to hang out with your bag.
I should have known.
Can you just
I'll let
give me
you
a little
have it
time?
one day,
Well, I'll hide it under the table. But I got a 14-year-old son, and he's a tinkerer, and he's a pitcher, and if you were to look back when you were 14 and you could do this whole thing over again, would you do anything differently? From youth baseball to the whole process and everything else.
Man, that's a good question. I selfishly would have skipped some of the learning curves if I could have, but I also think that was necessary to be who I am at this point. And I kind of have some peace and confidence about me because I've been through that kind of stuff and come out the other side of it. And credit to a lot of people around me who have worked with me and gotten me to this point. But I don't know. Not really.
Not really.
I don't know if
Have
there's
you had
something I
enough
would
fun?
change.
Do you have fun playing baseball?
Yeah, for sure. But it's funny. I do have to remind myself that sometimes. And sometimes I talk to Byrne about that it's crazy that I get to do this for a job. And if you would have told me when I was 4 or 5, I was these kids at spring training coming out here trying to get autographs. So it's like.
Did you do that in Florida?
Yeah, I did.
Where? Who did you go see?
We went to we were close to Disney, so we went to the Braves out there, Wide World of Sports, and I was just anybody around me, like bullpen catchers, anybody with a jersey. I was trying to get their autograph. The bat boy, doesn't matter.
What, just talking about where you are in your career, and you mentioned that you would like to be a Mariner long term. Next off season is your first arbitration year, which is exciting, I'm sure, for you and your family and kind of where your future goes. Have you had thoughts about a long-term commitment here with the Mariners, conversations, anything like that?
Well, this one was my first one this offseason.
I'm sorry, yes, this is your first arbitration.
Yeah.
Even better.
Why do you think he went to Italy?
Sorry. Yeah, my bad. Oh, so you had a much better trip to Italy than you would have a year ago.
Felt a little bit,
sorry.
a little better.
I got
about
that
it.
one wrong, yeah.
Well, we would have went to 3 cities. We went to 5 instead. No, it's great. I feel like I'm in a good position now. I would love to be here long term. If something works out like that over the next few years, it's something could definitely happen before I actually get to free agency. I don't know if it will, but I would love to be here long term.
He talked to you about me as a player and some of the paralysis by overanalysis. One thing I did love, Logan, and why I love this week and getting kind of behind the scenes and to see everybody here, is I loved the locker room. You hear that from players all the time, right? All the old guys. Oh, yeah. Gosh, you'll love the clubhouse. You'll miss the locker room, all that. I think of your rotation, your starting 5. We got a Bay Area dude, right? We've got a New Yorker. We've got an East Texan, almost Arkansas Texan. We got a Florida boy, and we got a DR fisherman.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever just kind of look around like, this is pretty freaking cool?
Yeah, they got one of each. It's like a melting pot of a rotation.
Yes.
It's cool, and it's funny how we all get along so well, especially I'll say Bryce and Castillo, which is probably the funniest relationship that they say about 3 or 4 of the same words every day to each other, but they're absolute best friends. It's so fun to watch. But Yeah, I don't know what it is. We just click really well, and it's also funny how different we are at the same time.
Can you tell us a little more about Luis? We don't get to know him as well. Often I'll speak through a translator with the media, etc. He's a blast to watch, and his demeanor and everything. But what is Luis Castillo like when we don't get to see him?
He's the best. It's hard to describe, honestly, but he's one of the best guys I've met, and one, he's so effortless and natural that it's unfair, but he also keeps it so simple, and he laughs at me with all my bag just like everybody else. Yeah. Such a good guy, so funny, honestly, behind the scenes. When you talk about the paralysis and all that stuff, he actually has helped me a lot there, because I'll still revisit that over-analysis at times throughout the year. Once or twice a year I'll throw a bullpen, and he tells me the same thing. He's like, don't think, don't change, don't try. He tells me the same thing every time, and that's what he does, and it works. And he can see when my gears are kind of turning, and he'll tell me that every time. He says, you think too much, you try too much, and don't change.
That's awesome.
Do you think he studies his stuff? Do you think he's kind of one of these sneaky that may come across like, hey, I'm going to just be – but then he goes back and actually does look at some of his numbers or his rates or his different –
I think he's very familiar with him. I think he knows himself really well and what his stuff does and how it plays at the big league level. He's seen that for years and had so much success. I don't know if he could just rattle off like specific spin rates or all this kind of stuff, but I think he knows it with his eyes, which is essentially the same in a different way.
It's Dan Marino. You're Florida. Do you remember Dan Marino?
Yep.
So older brother played with him, and he's like, yeah, how did you read that safety? What? And Dan's like, you look at that stuff? and he's like, don't tell me you're really, like, that's not going through your mind, right? You just throw it to him. Just see him open and throw it to him.
Just instinctual.
That's it. I mean, it's just a feel and an instinct that just some guys have.
It's just as good sometimes, or better.
Absolutely.
Probably better.
Yes.
I love that it's all these different types, though.
It is cool.
That there's so many different ways to get to the same spot. And the same with hitters. I mean, I covered Manny Ramirez for a few years, who's of that same, like,
see ball, hit ball.
Well, that's what he pretended.
Correct.
And behind the scenes, Manny was doing stuff that nobody had ever really done before, and training his eyes and all of that. It's just what makes this game great.
I love that, too. I've kind of gotten more to that state now where a few years ago I thought there was one way, it was my way, and everybody else, like, they're missing out, which I think I do a lot of good things that work, but I think they work for me. And now I'm kind of at the point where I'm trying to take bits and pieces from different people that – there's not one right answer. You can kind of mix all these things together.
Any advice for Bryce and Brian trying to throw more innings again? You've thrown a lot of innings the last few years and come through it, knock on wood, great. They both pitched more than they ever had before. Yeah. Any conversations around that?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit. I think the best thing that's worked for me that I would tell them is how you hit like these build-up marks. So throughout the offseason, I think I did it really well last year for the first time and much differently than years before, and I basically hit the same schedule this year. And then throughout the year, bullpens and days in between, knowing what you need and not getting more than that. Robbie was really big about talking to me about that because he's seen how much I like to do. But there's limits to that. It's not always more pitches that makes you way better. It's kind of what gets you right for Game 5 or Day 5 when you go out there.
When are you pitching first? Tomorrow? Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Awesome.
Monday?
Well, we'll be looking forward to it. Thanks for spending so much time with us this morning.
Yeah.
I told you it had to be our first interview. It was the only way to do it.
I'm honored. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah. It's going to make you famous. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Yeah,
congratulations.
Good
Thank you.
Yep.
It's good to have you. Logan Gilbert, our first guest here of spring training. And